Welcome to Sales Training for Podcasters, the podcast designed to better your sales process. We'll be sharing tools, tips, and techniques, whether you love sales or hate sales. If you've got a product or service to sell and a podcast, you've come to the right place. Now, here's your hosts, podcast strategists, Doug Sandler and JJ Flizanes.
Welcome back to the show. This is Doug Sandler.
And I'm JJ Flizanes.
Well, this is going to be a cool episode today because today we're going to talk about something that is very rarely discussed in the world of podcasting that has everything and yet nothing to do with the content. It's all about the strategy that you have when you actually get into podcasting. So let me tell you a little bit about the motivation behind this. So we just recently did our New Year's resolution. We came up with some goals. We came up with some action items. And I started to realize the importance behind actually developing, even more so than I had done before, the importance of developing a strategy when it comes to creating your content, creating your editorial calendar, everything that's involved with your podcast. There's got to be a strategy, because if you don't have a strategy, you're literally just opening up the microphone and you're talking to a guest, or you're monologuing about a subject that you may have that's near and dear to you, but you don't actually have a plan for it. So I wanted to talk a little bit today about the plan when you roll out your podcast. And if you're a seasoned podcaster, it's not too late if you don't have a finite and a direct strategy for actually creating a community, building influence, and making money with your podcast.
So we run a mastermind. It's called the Ultimate Podcast Mastermind. And part of what is included in that are a few VIP days. You can either do like a full, which is 8 hours and a half, or divide it into 3 half days. And it was what I implemented into the program to onboard people, because I thought that we needed more than an hour, and I needed to look at the entire business plan from everything you're doing that is connected and not connected to the podcast. And for me, I didn't even realize how much this really is my jam. Like, I've just been doing things for so long, and then when they work, I have now had to go back and think about, well, why did it work? And what did I do that other people aren't doing? And how did I think about this that to me is super obvious, that then I realize is not obvious at all to other people?
So if you're an action taker like I am, I love to do things like, oh, this is great. I'm going to build a landing page or a lead magnet, or I'm going to have an email campaign, or I have a call to action that I want to convert audience members to customers. Those are all great things, but without an overall strategy, they just become like little pockets of projects that you're doing, and you're left to the whim of the project you're working on rather than the overall strategy that you have for your entire podcast. And I had the opportunity a couple times when we were doing these onboarding calls, because we're doing them together, and I'm literally just sitting there and I'm listening to you talk to our mastermind members, and I'm like, holy shit. I mean, I've been podcasting for, as of the recording of this, nearly 1,200 episodes. And while our podcast has been ultra successful in conversion, we really never had a top-down 35,000-foot strategy that was put into place. And I was listening to you talk to our mastermind members and thinking, gosh, a lot of the stuff that you are sharing with them, I don't even necessarily have in place for my own podcast. And so I thought it was so important to put this together, because while where I excel is in the action, I don't excel in the strategy. And that's probably why we make a very good partnership in creating this mastermind.
Thank you. Well, I agree. And like I said, I knew I was good at it to a certain extent because of all the masterminds I've been in before, and me always having a very clear long-term picture for people. Like, my funnel is in my brain, and I know when I'm thinking about something, how it develops over time and where it's going. And so when I give advice, it's not just short-term, get some money in the door. It's a long-term relationship and business sustainability, because that's what most of us, I think, are looking for. Ultimately, when you start a business, and especially when you start a podcast, there's a certain amount of freedom and flexibility that you want by being an entrepreneur. You don't want a ceiling of money that you can't get past. You want to be able to travel, work when you want, make your own hours, be your own boss. But most entrepreneurs start out with no plan, no idea. And again, that's okay. That's where you are. But at some point, you have to have some kind of plan that you at least test out so that way you can see the future and make decisions based on where you want to go and develop those things and have a little patience and trust with them than to just chase the money and then go after one little thing at a time. Because I'll tell you, I've now been an entrepreneur for 20 years, that's exhausting. And when you think, okay, this is it, this is the thing that's going to bring me the money. And when I get the money, I'm going to feel calmer and I'm going to have money in the bank and I'm going to be able to pay off my debts and I'll be able to do X, Y, Z. And the reality of it is it doesn't work that way. And I learned that the most from having the podcast. And some of you heard the story already. When I started my show, it was a 6-day-a-week show. My goal wasn't money. My goal was information. I had so much damn content, I needed some place to put it. And so I wanted to test how I wanted to show up in the world before making a plan about which one of the days of the week, which content, which theme, which subject matter was I going to build an entire podcast in business around. What was the universe and the world asking me to show up to present? And that's the reason for my podcast. A lot of people, though, start a podcast thinking all of a sudden I'm going to reach millions of people and everyone's going to buy my shit. And then you have no idea that there's like a long-term plan here. Podcasting is not a quick, flash in the pants kind of thing where you get exposed to a lot of people and they actually know, like, and trust you enough to take action on that.
So I'm curious, when I originally said to you, I'd love to do an episode on strategy, something obviously clicked in your mind. It wasn't necessarily for me. It wasn't necessarily, let's do that thing that JJ does so well, which is sit down and actually develop a strategy and develop a plan. My definition of strategy kept me locked into that same small little micro economy of launch to launch to launch to launch. And just like you said, it was like I was looking at each thing as this is the thing that's going to put me on the map financially. And while, we've had some successful launches and we've had some successful programs that we've put through, it was like so segmented. I really didn't have like an overall, this is exactly the overarching, you do it with many of our mastermind members and you talk about this story arc. And that for me is like, whoa, that was really cool because you start to really break down this overall strategy, this, let's say, year-long strategy or just podcast strategy. You break it down into small bite-sized pieces called episodes. And those episodes help you create this buzz about a specific something that you're doing. So what was it that excited you about the whole idea of doing an episode on strategy?
So for those of you that have known me prior to this show, prior to the show that we're doing right now, and maybe I've had other podcasts and I still run most of them. And so I've had an evolution. So if you would go back to the early days of when I started my show, again, not having a strategy because I didn't know which lane I was going to emphasize, if you will. When I finally did know what lane I wanted to emphasize and where my people were and how I was going to be working with them and or what genre, what words, what keywords, then I started to open up to have that relationship with people to create to create things that they wanted and needed. I forget who it was recently. We have a client who doesn't know. Well, she said she had 3 different groups of people that she wanted to work with, and we haven't done her VIP day yet, but within the 1-hour session, I said, instead of thinking, well, I'm going to create this program, I said, stop. We're going to go back and ask the people who you are currently working with what they want first, then you'll create what they need and what they're willing to pay for. Because too often, entrepreneurs, whether you're a podcaster or not, waste a ton of time making shit nobody wants to buy because you don't ask them if they want to buy it. You don't ask them how much they're going to pay for it. And then you think it's the best idea in the world and try to sell it. And then you're disappointed when you don't have a lot of sales. So what excited me about the strategy piece, because now so many years later, I've been podcasting now since September 2014. And so we're in 2021. So it's going to be in September, 7 years. And I'll say I really kicked into my stride when I separated the show in 2016. And so 2016 to 2019, so those 3 years were where I cultivated like a very loyal, dedicated following of people who showed me and taught me what they wanted and needed from me. And I spent those 3 years creating and stepping into the next version of myself to deliver that. So for me, I'm looking at other podcasters that we're friends with, people that we've worked with, people that we've been in events with, and I'm seeing that they're not really any further along than they were 5 or 6 years ago, except for the amount of episodes that they have. I don't see that their business development, maybe they've changed brands, maybe they've tried a bunch of things, but I don't see a consistent, again, back to the build your own economy. I don't see a consistent momentum and evolution of gathering a large group of, whether it be on an email list or on your podcast listeners or on a Facebook community. I don't really care where they exist, but I don't find that a lot of people have, I mean, some do, and they're not making any money from those because they're not even selling really anything because they don't know what they're selling yet. And then some people, they think they know what they're selling, but they don't have an audience. And I'm like, but you've been podcasting for 6 years. Why don't you have an audience? And I look at that and I say, now, again, it's not for me to judge. If you're happy with where you are, who gives a shit? What's my opinion worth? Nothing. But I'm saying from a business perspective, when you want to like relax and take all the advantages of being an entrepreneur and a podcaster and enjoy your freedom and enjoy taking time off and being flexible, in order to do that, there has to be a foundation that you're sitting on top of that you know that when you want to sell something or you want some quick cash, you can go make a program and boom, you sell it to a bunch of people and they want it, you want to give it, and it's a not that you need to be selling things quickly, but you understand what I'm saying. Like I feel this confidence and trust in my community that at any point in time, I have a new offering. I know I'm going to have sales every time. Now, may not be a 6-figure sale in a month, but it may be because it's what's been happening over time. So for me, what excites me about strategy is that I wish more people had one. And I wish that you really understood the power of looking at your production schedule, looking at your offerings, looking at your lead generation and being a little bit more proactive about the future and lining things up and having a deeper trust that the people on the other side of your podcast listening to you have to know, like, and trust you. And there are certain steps that have to happen in order for that to happen. And then when you have them, they become loyal clients who buy from you over and over again and keep investing in you and themselves for years.
So a couple questions came to mind as you were talking about that. I'm curious, is it better to have someone that's an experienced podcaster start to develop a strategy or someone that's right out of the gate? That would be question one. And secondly, what would be a good starting point, whether you're an experienced podcaster or someone that's coming green to us?
When we started the mastermind, I wanted only people who were experienced podcasters. And the reason was because when you start out as a new podcaster and you're a business owner, and let's say you're a successful business owner, and then you start a podcast, you have certain expectations about what your podcast is going to do based on your own business success. And it may or may not come to fruition the way that you thought it would. And so I kind of needed people to feel, I wanted to know that you've tried it and you're frustrated and you can't figure it out. And therefore you need help. So I wanted to work with experienced podcasters because most of them would have at least a body of work, a certain number of downloads and people to reach out to get feedback and hopefully some sales and hopefully some kind of group so that we could extract what's missing. And then we can put in and rearrange and plan for the future what it is that they need, but they already are committed to doing their show on a regular basis and putting it out there. The problem with a lot of new podcasters is that you don't know what you don't know yet. And you go in again thinking this is going to be so easy and maybe you think it's a side marketing thing and you're really not that committed to it. So then you pod fade when you get frustrated after the first 30 to 50 episodes and think, why isn't anything else happening? And so you're ready to give up. So to me, that's not a committed podcaster yet because you're too connected to taking score every week of what is happening or not happening versus trusting the process. And
the only score that they take, unfortunately,
is downloads.
Right? So they're looking at these download numbers, it doesn't matter what your download numbers are. Bigger audience does not equate to a more of a converting audience. It only converts to more downloads, which will mean nothing to you.
My December and November downloads for my most popular show were lower than they have been, and I've made way more money. So I just want to reiterate, we say it all the time, downloads don't equal dollars. Downloads don't matter. Conversion matters. So it doesn't matter how many downloads you have. It matters if you're speaking to the right audience is finding you, you're offering the things that they want and that they're taking, that's compelling enough, they're connected to you enough, they trust you enough that they're taking action on that.
Well, I was just going to add, we understand the confusion oftentimes when someone is a podcaster, whether they're a mastermind member of ours or just someone that comes to us for advice, asking us, how do I grow my community? Or how do I create a larger field by which people will listen to my show? And it doesn't necessarily equate to more dollars in the bank. So know that when you're looking at the metric of success in podcasting, it is absolutely not your download numbers. We've said that so many times, but the reality of it is that you've got to hear it. You've really got to hear it. That is not the measure of success in podcasting.
So when we first started it, like I said, I wanted the mastermind, that is, I wanted seasoned podcasters because, it's not because they would be defeated. It would be because they got to the place where they knew they needed help, right, and that they were, again, committed to podcasting because they've been doing it. But they knew they were missing something. Okay. Because so they're aware they have a problem. See, new podcasters aren't aware they have a problem yet. So they get started and they just think, oh, this is going to be easy. This is going to be successful. I already know how to do business. I'm a great marketer. I know how to do this. And I want to say, no, that isn't necessarily going to mean you're going to be a successful podcaster, and definitely not right away. We don't know. And that's the whole thing. Nobody knows how long it's going to take for you to either build a community or to start making money from your show. So what happened over this weekend, and I'm going to give a shout out to Becky Jones, Garden Your Mind. Becky is a mastermind client of ours, and we did her first VIP day. And now Becky isn't a new podcaster, meaning she already has a show, but she started her show and then she took a hiatus, and now she's coming back. And what was really fun was to work with someone in the beginning who knew they needed a strategy, who understood this ahead of time because she joined the mastermind. She knew she needed direction. And so now we got to take all the parts and pieces and mold this so beautifully and not waste time, not create things that we don't want, and really focus on what's right for you in your business. And it's different than what's right for other people. And so I really, shout out to you, Becky, and Garden Your Mind. So check out Becky's podcast, Garden Your Mind. And because we're in that cultivating gardening process. See, again, Becky understands gardening. You plant the seed. You don't go out every day and say, hey, did it grow yet? Hey, did it grow yet? Hey, is there a fruit yet? Like, you understand.
Or the first sight of any green, just pick it because it's ready to go. It's like, no, right. you got it. There is definitely cultivation. This is not nothing in podcasting is an overnight success. Even some of the strategies that I have that will help you build your monetization tool fairly quickly. Fairly quickly does not mean overnight. Can you do it, in a month? Can you do it in 2 or 3 months? Absolutely. You can definitely make a 6-figure income from your show in 90 days of podcasting. But you've got to understand that it still has to fall into the overall strategy of what you're looking to get from your show. Yes, we do have plans in place and action items that you can go through to guest a client or JV partnerships or affiliate relationships or any number of faster dollar-making opportunities. But the way to long-term sustained growth is through community growth and building your community. And that's where really your strategy comes into play.
So you'd asked me about, is it better to work with seasoned podcasters or new podcasters? And the reason we didn't work with new podcasters is because I remember some of the people that we talked to when we started the mastermind who were just starting out understood the need for strategy. But again, just thought, well, I'm successful in business, so I'll know what to do. I'll figure this out. This is not going to be hard. And I don't know where those people are right now.
Well, I can tell you, I'm not going to mention any names, but I look at the podcasts that have had that as that was the starting block for them right out of the starting gate. And I look and I see they're still working on I don't have a monetization tool out of my podcast. I haven't grown my community, or I've got a community. I just don't know what to do with them now.
Right.
Like, oh yeah, that's key. You got to know what to do with your community once you grow them. And if you don't have a community, you absolutely need a strategy to grow a community.
So while, it's fun to allow the evolution and expansion of this idea where, I first said it's going to be people who already have a podcast. And now I'm like, well, people that understand strategy, understand business, understand they need a direction, and they're so new. That's great and fun. And it's always a balance, by the way, of finding how to make more money now while simultaneously planting the seeds for money later. It's a combination of, again, it's like long-term and short-term investments. And where do you put your time? And a podcast is absolutely a long-term investment, but it is such a good long-term investment that you get to the place where you don't need anything else most of the time. Now, you can have it, of course, but I love strategy and I love figuring this stuff out. And what I love most about doing it with people is giving them direction so they don't have to try to figure it out on their own, and to remind them of the pieces. And again, all I can do is operate from what's worked for me. But again, I just take what I've done and I think about, well, why did that work? And I look at other people's podcasts or strategies or listen to their show, and I can tell you why I think some of that doesn't work. And we're applying it right now. We're in the process. But rather than just, a VIP day, I do want to mention that, because what's funny is we are talking about this at a time where, without even asking for it, we've gotten a testimonial from a former client who did Doug's launch formula, and he did our sales mapping strategy. So we have different offerings. The Mastermind is a year-long program. We also do VIP days, but we also have, like, the least amount of investment and time is just getting your sales strategy in place. And that's like a 90-minute call with Doug and I, and you come out of it with a map, and we look at where your leads are coming from. We look at all your tech. We look at the easiest way for you to develop these things. And we did a bunch of these a while ago. And Paul, I'm going to read to you. It's from Paul Van. Shout out to Paul. He is the host of the Wealth Academy podcast. And he said a huge thank you goes out to JJ Flizanes and Doug Sandler for offering their incredible mapping strategy. After completing the Ultimate Podcast launch formula, I decided to invest in the mapping strategy, and I'm glad I did, because it's elevating my marketing strategy for my business. I host Wealth Academy podcast, and the mapping strategy is resulting in me growing my list by offering prospects an opportunity to win a free live coaching session on my podcast, plus more. None of this would have been possible without JJ and Doug's leadership and expertise. I've already begun generating revenue from the mapping strategy, and I highly recommend you invest and do the same. Thanks, JJ and Doug, for the positive impact you're making on my business.
So
operations.
Nice. That was so cool of Paul when I saw that email. Then that email came out of the blue, and I was like, oh, that was very nice of him. And I have to tell you, this was the mapping strategy came, if I remember correctly, in the sequence of events. It happened before we had our mastermind, didn't it?
It happened while we were doing the mastermind. It was definitely it was one of the first ideas of how to create strategy for people. And it is just based on your sales process. And it is a short amount of time, but then we looked at it and said, well, we need more time to look at how do you build your podcast to create the sales process. We can tell you, here's what your different lead magnets are and how to create the funnels and where the funnel goes and how to seed that. But then we don't have time to strategize how it's going to be on the podcast, how many episodes, what kind of episodes, how do you overcome objections, what guests, do you do solo episodes, like all that stuff is not, we can't do that in 90 minutes. But it was the fastest, easiest, most productive way for us to do something with podcasters to help with a strategy to get in money. So
that sales mapping process came out of a client that we actually had back in Baltimore when we were doing customer service training. And one of the areas that we discovered was the biggest area of lost opportunity was in those spots where you're talking to your client. In this case, you're talking to your guest or you're talking to your community, and there may be something that is completely right under your nose and you don't even see it. So a third party coming in like us that has a little bit of experience with customer service and now a lot of experience with podcasting, it's easy for us to see where the holes are because all you have to do is lay out the current strategy that you have in place. So I would highly encourage you that to look at the overall sales map that you have. And if you don't even know what a sales map is, it would give you a great opportunity to have a conversation. Just have a conversation with us, because I'd love to talk to you about how to find the lost opportunity or how to find the opportunity where you may not even see it.
Well, if you go to salestrainingforpodcasters.com, we're going to provide one of the master classes that we did for you on the sales mapping process. So if you want to come and find out more details and sign up to get a copy of the webinar, you can watch it, take notes, and build your own process. Come over to salestrainingforpodcasters.com and you can get that. And it's free. There's no cost involved to get the webinar that we did that goes over how to make your own sales mapping process and all the things that are included in that. So we wanted to provide that for you and really just encourage you to create a strategy. And of course, reach out if you need some help, but look at your podcast differently. Look at your selling differently. Look at a longer term strategy, understand the psychology of human know, like, and trust, and figure out if you were the person on the other side, what would it take for you to pull out your credit card? What would it take for you to ask for help? What would they need to say? What are the pain points? All the things that you know about selling in general. And if you don't, of course, we're going to cover it. That's what this podcast is about. But for anything that you need help with, and things that you are offering to your clients, what do they want to hear in order for them to say yes? And again, we're going to continue to cover all kinds of stuff about sales training, but this whole piece of strategy, let's go over why, Doug, you had resistance to it, because I know in the beginning you did have resistance.
Well, I can tell you why I had resistance, because I wasn't a long-term thinker. It was not, as an entrepreneur, I'm like thinking, okay, how do we get qualified leads to come in the door right now? How do we get conversions right now? I'm not thinking about, I think about strategy and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that's like a year-long project. For me, it was not about the here and now and taking action, which I love doing. It was more about the, I can have my vision board and I can have my far off distance goals, but I'm not really sure that is going to work in the case of podcasting. How does that convert to dollars in the door right now?
Well, again, the strategy should take into consideration money now and money later. So done well, you have two sets of plans. So just to give a shout out again to Becky, we looked at what she had, what assets she was connected to right now in this red hot moment that would profit her like immensely, that has nothing to do with her podcast. While she's taking care of that and using that opportunity to bring in some money and business and create a business, she's also creating a business online, which isn't going to happen tomorrow. But she can use both of those and connect them both to help each other so that later there's a constant flow of leads and opportunities and a community, no matter where she goes, no matter what she's doing. And she can pick and decide who she wants to serve in what way, because she has access to the people who care about what she's talking about and want her help because they know, like, and trust her.
So as an entrepreneur, I was here and now. I wanted immediate action.
You're a money chaser.
I wouldn't disagree with that. I wouldn't argue with that. But I've been successful at it because I'm a money chaser that is in constant motion. Money chasers that are in money for now. When you stop chasing money, guess what happens? The money goes away. I've been chasing money for 30 years. And until I really understood the value of this bigger picture, long-term strategy. Now, there may be many people that are listening to this show that come into this with a Fortune 500 company background and history, and maybe part of that was the what's your 1-year goal, or what's your 3-year vision, or what is your mission? And for me, I want to say, unfortunately, it was never about that. It was always about what action can I take today that will have a direct result tomorrow. It was never what action can I take today that will help me with my big picture thinking down the road.
Well, what action can you take today that results in dollars later, not tomorrow? There's money now, money tomorrow, and money later. And if we're not hitting all those points, how do I get money now? How do I get money tomorrow? And how do I get money later? And we're looking at all three of them in the podcast. I think it's best in the money later, but you got to be doing things to make money now, of course, until you are in the later stage of your podcast, which I'm in. So I don't need to worry about tomorrow because I have a plan and it's just all going to kind of unfold, and things are unfolding at a rate that I don't have to do anything. And
that has been the beauty of this relationship, is that I'm a very here and now action taker today. And that rewards many people that come into podcasting that want a quick turn. They want $1, they want a $5,000 paycheck in the next 30 days. And while that is not a bad idea, it's launch mentality. And launch mentality, it creates, the harder you work, the more money you make. The more you work, the more money you make. But it's like, when can you ever let off of the gas pedal? And I think the strategy, the long-term strategy that you've put into play, which is amazing, it's how do I do the work now over a slow and steady period of time so that in 6 months or a year from now, or in your case, 6 years from now, let's
say 3, because honestly, it didn't start until I separated and rebranded my shows. So let's say 3 years.
Yeah. And in that 3-year period of time, not only have you built a community that you can depend upon to create your own economy, which is the beauty of how you've done it. You could introduce any product or service to your community knowing full well that they're going to want it and almost count on the sales that are going to come in the door. I can't do that. Or I couldn't have done that before I put into play some of the strategies that you've shared with me. On the other side of it, I look at it and think, okay, what can I do today that will reward me tomorrow? And again, part of it is it's very hard to let your foot off the gas pedal if you've grown dependent upon that.
Which is why you need a strategy so you can chill the fuck out and not be so not have so much anxiety.
Agreed.
Because how many launch mentality people do we know?
Agreed.
Like it's feast or famine.
Everybody that has launch mentality is so stuck in launch mentality they don't understand the benefit to long-term thinking and to the into the income pattern that long-term thinking will gain them.
I look at it as when you're in launch mentality, it's this: I got to hit the bullseye, and if I don't, then what? And so every time, like all the space in between, oh my God, it's so exhausting. It's so exhausting. And I don't find it to be like, well, and I will say there are people who are doing launch mentality who do in between do a very good job of creating a community from that launch. So they do have a build. You can do both. I just see a lot of people that don't do it well, that don't do both well. They do either launch really well or they are allowing themselves, because again, and I'm going back to, if you're an entrepreneur and you're a podcaster who wants to be an entrepreneur, why does anyone work for themselves? What do you want by working for yourself?
Freedom.
Right. You want freedom. Now, if you're in launch mentality, then you aren't free.
You're locked to your launch.
Because you are a victim to money. You are a victim to the scarcity of, I have to have a launch. I have to work so hard or spend a lot of money in order to get to this number, in order to pay for my life. Because you don't have another way. And so again, strategy isn't just about being smart. It's about having a plan, and it's about building and allowing something to gain momentum over time so that again, you reap the rewards, not only just, and it's not that far in the future. A lot of you know, okay, so let's go back to, it's been less than 3 years. I rebranded Spirit, Purpose, and Energy in late October of 2016. I had people reaching out to me within 2 months of that show. I had my first lead magnet in place in January of 2017. So not even 3 months later. And I had, over 100 people sign up for that lead magnet and be a part of my free manifestation challenge. 100 people. That's a pretty significant amount of people who newly are coming on to start building with me and saying, I'm interested in what you're doing.
100% through your podcast.
100% through my podcast. I've never advertised the Manifestation Challenge because, that's not true. I did it once. When I did that one time, I had people come on and leave. And I realized that the attrition was higher when they weren't podcast listeners.
Yeah, no like and trust
because
factor.
They didn't have a no like and trust factor. They were coming on for their free gifts and they were leaving. So now no one is allowed in the group unless you listen to my show. And you kind of get a little test before you get in. You get verified. You have to be on the list. There's a whole process. It's a free group, but you're not allowed in it unless you're in my group because I need to know we have a relationship. Because that's how, for me, it's not about, again, large numbers in the door and then I lose half of them because we have no relationship. The no like and trust is coming from my podcast. So 2017 was my first lead magnet. So again, 3 months later, and maybe it was less than 100 people, but it was a significant amount of people, and it was a really fun group. And I would do it every couple of months. And then a year from that date, on January 2018, was my first live event. So now we're not even 2 years into this new podcast, and I'm having my first live event where I had 40 people fly in from all over the world to come to my event. That was very humbling. So That was within a year and a half of launching the new brand. And those people who listened to Spirit Purpose Energy weren't Fit to Love listeners. They didn't even know I had other podcast. So I'm saying it doesn't have to take 3 years. It can take a year. It could take 6 months. It could take 2 years. You will know if you're doing things well. And, I was on today there's an Instagram tagging going on about how to grow your community. There's about a whole bunch of Clubhouse conversations happening about growing your podcast, free ways and paid ways. And one of my dear friends listed a lot of really great ways, and she tagged a bunch of podcasters, and she said, okay, add what your way is. And I said, make an episode so good that your people share it with everyone they know. Because if you're passionate about your content and your content provides value and it changes lives and it increases sales and it gets people money and it gets them excited and they want to share it with everyone they know, I've had organic growth this entire time. I'm only now, after 3 years of doing Spirit, Purpose, and Energy, going to consider doing ads. And I'm going to test out doing ads on podcasts. But I haven't had to. I haven't needed to. Would it be better if I would have, if it was available then? Probably. We'll see, because we're going to do ads for this show and we're going to see how it goes. So again, before you go putting ads into your show, I do not support or believe people should be paying for advertising until you have a tested concept, until you have a tested concept that your community will buy from you, the subject matter you're speaking about, the way that you present, all those things work. When you have working funnels that convert, then pay for ads. But do not pay for ads to try to get people who you don't even know if your message is effective yet, that your audience is congruent, that they know who you are and they buy from you. So please have a strategy. Again, go to salestrainingforpodcasters.com. We're offering for a limited time a way for you to get access to a webinar that we have done on this sales mapping process, and we will make it available to you for free at salestrainingforpodcasters.com.
Well, I'm looking forward to talking more strategy and giving more action items, more ways to make money, grow influence, and build your community. Thanks for tuning in another week. Any final words before we wrap?
If there's any other questions that we did not cover today, again, please check out Turnkey Podcast. Check out salestrainingforpodcasters.com and Sales Training for Podcasters podcast. You can go to jjflizanes.com, dougsandler.com. There's a lot of information. Just go to the bio. We have a bunch of links, but you can find us if you have any questions in between now and the next episode. So don't wait. Reach out. We'd love to chat with you.
All right. See you, everybody.
Thanks for listening to Sales Training for Podcasters. To get additional information and to access more amazing content that will boost your sales game, visit salestrainingforpodcasters.com. Hey, do us a favor. Rate and review our show on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Again, thanks for listening.